All right, we're back, and it is COMP305, the fall 2016 semester at Centennial, and we are week 8, part 1 of our broadcast. Today, we're going to do a few things differently. We've been working on Unity 2D for the first half of the semester, and now in the second half, we're going to do Unity 3D, right? But before we start the 3D part with Blender, which is what we're going to be using today, I'm going to pull up your assignment, and I want to talk about your lab for today too. So up on eCentennial, I've kind of put together an assignment for you guys, assignment 3. Okay, and it looks like this. There's 2 parts to it. Actually, and on eCentennial, you'll see 2 separate parts. Part 1 is due next week, and part 2 is due the week after, the final part. Let's talk about this. So you're going to be building a 3D game just like before, right? So you're just like you did the first, the kind of a side scroller in 2D before, and you did a platformer in 2D. This time you're going to be doing a 3D game, but you can use a partner to do that. So again, following the 3D tutorials in class, working with a partner or solo, it's up to you. I don't recommend solo. If you can work with somebody else, it might make your life a lot easier, right? You don't have to choose a section. You can also work with people in the first section because it's one big section, right? Doesn't matter who you work with. You will create your own 3D game, and the 3D game is either a first-person or third-person perspective. Now, I recommend highly first-person perspective. Third-person perspective is way more challenging because you have to think about cameras, animation, all kinds of stuff, right? So for this game, right, for this assignment, because only worth 10%, I recommend first-person perspective. If you're someone who wants to challenge yourself, certainly you can work on third-person perspective. That's only if you want a real challenge. I'm talking a real challenge. This is not easy stuff, right? The game must include elements, hazards for the players to avoid and destroy, just like before. A scoring system must also be included, and you must use your own graphics and sound assets. What that means is, please don't use an asset that I made in class, right, as your assets. Use your own. And that could mean you making your own or downloading your own. Okay? Again, no scripts allowed. So no, if you download something from the asset store, you can get an asset, but you can't use the scripts that you download from the asset store. Okay? Same kind of idea, a gameplay scene with an avatar, vehicle, or character, using the standard keys for movement, and an optional mouse control for first-person perspective. For example, for doing things like looking up or, kind of a look. It's built into your first-person perspective, a controller we're going to be using today, but I'm making it optional because some people have chosen in the past not to use any kind of mouse control, all keyboard controls, and that's fine. If that's what you really want to do, you can certainly do that. And of course, spacebar for jumping, that's the typical thing. You can certainly use other controls, but what we want to do, and again, this is just best practices, you want to stay to the controls that are standard. If you're actually going to make a game in real life, then if you make controls that are whacked, like completely like on a different side of the keyboard or something weird, players will have more challenge playing them, because as we move on, as we play games, and when you first start playing game as a kid, especially if you become, you play video games a lot, if you notice, people use the same controls over and over again, right? Because these are kind of like de facto standards we use. So once you go outside that, you can do that. But the challenge is that it's going to take a lot longer for players to ramp and learn the game from a tutorial perspective, right? So again, I don't recommend it. I think you should stay with standard controls if you can. Random placement of items to collect and obstacles to pass through or over. This will generate points for the player, right? I like this. I mean, so that way you can avoid enemies and not have to kill them. Some people don't like to make violent games, right, where they kill their enemies. They just have to avoid them, right? Scoring system, so somehow you have a score, some kind of heads-up display or a user interface that gives you a score and life. And it could be that you're using a life counter or health bar or something like that that shows me, how healthy the character is. Sound effects for collisions with enemies and collecting points is required. Internal documentation is normal. External documentation, your GDD is a little bit more complex, only in that, and again, I've been looking at all your projects, so I've looked at all of them. For the most part, people are doing okay. Just an update for the exam. Everyone passed, I think. I think there's only one person that kind of came close not to pass. Don't worry, right? People are all worried. But for the most part, everyone passed, right? And, you know, and also some people did really well because they stayed for extra points. Some people left early, Winnie, and it's not because I don't love Winnie that I'm telling you that, but I was like shocked. She's like, I'm done. I'm over. I don't want to come. I don't want to stay. It's boring, right? I know she's laughing at me, but the thing is, it's okay. The exam was there for you to do two things, right? With all respect. One, learn something. Like I always try and make my exams so that you learn something from them, right? And the second thing is get points that if you didn't do so well on assignment 1 and assignment 2, the exam can give you extra points for your assignment 1 and 2 to make up the difference. Give you a sense of competition. Some people were first. They finished their exam first and they got extra points for that, which I liked. And the ability for you to create in a shortened time, almost like a little game jam of something that you're making in a short time frame. So that's what the exam was for, and I think everyone did fairly well on that. Some people didn't hand in their assignments, and if you haven't handed them in, you know, again, I understand that some people have extraneous reasons why they haven't handed them in, but please talk to me. You know, if you haven't handed something in, because I don't want you to miss out on an opportunity for marks. Okay, so one thing I noticed when I was looking at some external documentation is, you know, you have your interface sketch. You thought this was a screenshot. It's not. It's wireframes, and there's still wireframes required for this project, right? This assignment, right? So wireframes means wireframe out or draw out, sketch out what your level for your 3D is going to look like. Remember, the level that I'm looking for is roughly 5 minutes again. In total capacity, right? That means like dying and getting to the end, right? Don't make it so complex that it's 15 or 20 minutes, because that means I have to play 15, 20 minutes for me to finish. It's too long. Like I got to look at everybody's stuff, right? That's number one. So when you wireframe things out, just say, well, here's where the character starts, and here's where the character has to go, just like you did for your platformer. Think about this as almost like a 3D platformer. In fact, a lot of people who did this assignment in the past have done a 3D platformer. So they've done, you know, kind of, you're on the side and then you jump to this part and you have to get some coin that's way up here, and then you're going to come down and then go over here, and then you have a landscape. You know, there's all kinds of stuff that they use for just to, you know, to kind of create their game. So interface sketch is wireframes. Then screen descriptions. Some people only gave me one, even before. Look, I'm asking for 3 screenshots. One for your start state when the game starts, one for your gameplay state, let's say where you're fighting an enemy or avoiding an enemy, and then one for your game end state when the game ends. Okay, that's what I'm looking for. There's got to be a game end though, eh? There can't just be the game go on forever. When your character dies, you know, you got to have a way of restarting the game. Okay? Characters, vehicles, enemy scoring, all that stuff's the same. I also noticed some people didn't include sound, or they included their own sounds, but there were issues. So please try and have this part done for this assignment. GitHub is normal, and then of course some optional game features. So empower the computer control enemies to fire bullets. That's a little bit more challenging now because it's 3D. So you have to fire bullets with something like a raycast, right? Or they can lob stuff at you. They can throw things at you. More complex again. And how do they hit you? When they hit you, how much damage does it do? Like this is a mechanic. The more complex you make this, the more it'll take to program this out, right? And then a mini-map. That's not that difficult to do. You're using a separate camera, right? So there's 2 cameras. One that the player sees, and another one that kind of hangs out above the whole scene that moves with the player, let's say, and can kind of take in a portion of what the player is looking at. All right? So kind of cool. And you can project it onto an actual sprite image. The camera itself, that's one thing you can do. We'll talk about how to do that in future iterations, or more further down the line. Particles for explosions and bullet impacts, a final boss monster to avoid, power-ups for the player's avatar, cool soundtrack for the game. These are all things that people added. Like some people did a whole beatbox for their first assignment, second assignment. That's fine. I'm okay with that too. Procedural 3D map generation. If you really want a challenge, go ahead. Right? This is like much more difficult to do. 2D map generation is hard enough. 3D map generation is quite hard. But if you really want to research, if you're a gaming student, you may want to try and do this. Again, there's a basic rubric for where all the points are spread out. Submitting your work, of course, is you need an external document. This is really turning out today. A WebGL build up on eCentennial as normal, and a link to your GitHub, worth 10% of your final grade. So that's the 3D game I promised you're going to get. It's here a little late. I was hoping I was going to give it to you last time when we left, but couldn't get around to it. Again, 2 parts. 1 part due next week with you and your partner. So your game design document, your GitHub repo, basic assets should be done, player movement, we're going to talk about that today, and some simple game mechanics, all due by next week, right? And I'll check that with you guys when you're in class. Part 2, your final version, all your enemies should be up and running, your scoring system, your GitHub repo, and your updated game design document with screenshots should be all ready to go by the final week, which is week 10. Now, even though it says week 9 and week 10, it's actually the Monday, November 14th. So it's like actually week 9.2, you know, and week 10.2, right? Because it's on the Monday, not the Saturday. I didn't want to make it on the Saturday because people complain. I need an extra day. What if I have questions, Tom? Can you help me out? Yes, I can help you out, right? So, yes. Next Saturday, I'm going to ask you to show me something. So next Saturday, what I want to see is show me your game design document. Let's do a quick, I'll book some time with you guys, you and your group. So you and your member, your other team member. Now, if you're in different sections, like for example, if one person's in the morning and one person's in the afternoon, one of you has to show me. Okay, it doesn't have to be both. So arrange for which one's going to show me, and so I don't have to bother the other person, right? So we can speed things up a little bit. We don't want to spend the whole session me reviewing your work, right? Because that'll be like really a waste of time. I want to also talk about other things like firing guns and simple animation next week, stuff like that, and maybe some terrain, right? I want to create a terrain. We did this week. We did. You know, we're doing tiles, you know, like with some kind of maze. By the way, you don't have to make a maze, even though I'm going to show you maze tiles today. You can make it completely different, right? But we're going to show you the maze part, and then next week we're going to do a terrain, how to do terrains with trees and everything else, right? All built into Unity. And then you'll have everything you need by next week with the scoring system and everything, because we've already done UI. We're not changing anything on UI, right? So all the same user interface elements that I kind of showed you for the first 2 assignments are still good for this one. There's nothing different here. After this week, after we get this project, for the final set of stuff we're going to do for the last 4 weeks of class, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you how to make a mini map. More stuff with 3D, a lot more stuff, more Blender stuff that we're going to be working on. How to save and load your game elements, like that kind of stuff. Like there's going to be that piece to it, right? Multiple scenes. How do I handle moving from one scene to the other scene? You know, that kind of stuff. And how to keep data from one scene to the other scene. There's different techniques we can use, right? All those kinds of things are coming. You know, more advanced AI. So how do I do things like, how does an enemy player follow you, right? What do they do? You know, how do you create traps and that kind of stuff in your game? And anything else, any other topics that we haven't covered for, if you're doing first of all, if your final project is a 2D game, I might cover some other stuff for 2D. Like let's say you want to do a 2D platformer for your final project. That's okay, right? You may choose to do that. I might cover some other topics based on what you asked me to do for 2D, right? If there's enough interest. And we'll do a little bit of a poll, and I'll try and cover those topics because there's a lot to cover and we don't have a lot of time. One thing I can't cover for you, just to let you know, is I can't cover networking and multiplayer. That's really covered in game programming too, so please don't ask me for that. And I don't want to do too much into animation and rigging because that requires 2-3 weeks to do, right, properly. So I can't really cover animation and rigging a three-dimensional character. That's just going to take way too long for us. And not because I don't want to do that, because I like doing that kind of stuff, but it really literally takes, there's parts that we have to do in Blender or in Maya, different programs. There's parts also we're going to have to activate in Unity. So there's many parts to it. I will be talking about how to get assets from the asset store, and I will be sharing some assets you can use. There's also a couple things you could do. What if you wanted to, instead of using a first-person perspective game, you wanted to make it a car, some kind of driving game? Well, there are standard assets that I will allow you to use, right? Because, again, we're making a prototype, right? I caution you, however, car driving games can be quite monotonous and boring. right? Because it's all been done before, like a parking simulator. Please don't make a parking simulator again. I have my fill of parking simulators, right? And make sure when you do your 3D stuff that I can't pass through your buildings. That's also a bad thing. Some people make buildings where they make an archway. Like inside the building, there's an archway, and I got to pass through the archway. Sometimes that can be a problem depending on how you do things in Blender. I'm just letting you know. Or how you bring these assets in from the asset store. You might buy an asset from the asset store for $5, but you can't use it because it's made for a previous version of Unity, or you need to take it back into Maya or 3D Studio Max or Blender and modify things. You know, be very careful when you download assets. Not all of them are useful. Okay. Any questions around assignment 3? Again, this is with you, and I recommend highly another person. Please do not do this on your own, right? It's a lot of work for 10%, like I said, and I think try and choose the person that you're going to work with that you probably are going to work with on the final project. That's a really good thing to do, right? On the final project, I will allow 3 people. I may allow 4 people, I'm just telling you right now, if there's enough work for everyone to do, okay? Because the final project requires 3 levels, right? Whatever game or genre you choose, or aspect, if you choose a game that's, for example, a 2D game, it's a platformer, you know, three levels in a platformer. Or if you're going to choose some kind of space shooter, you know, side-scrolling kind of game, and you know, you have to think about the complexity. There's low complexity for that kind of game. I'm going to ask for a little bit more when it comes to that kind of game. We're going to be talking about it when we talk about the final project. I'm going to ask you for a few more things in that kind of game than I would for a platformer or for a 3D game. Just letting you know, right? And I will outline those options as we go towards the final project. So probably next week or the week after, I want to give you your final project information, so you have everything you need to finish it off or start early, and try to combine forces with other people to start outlining what your game is going to be. Yes. Yes. Yes, 1. So yes, that's a good question. So the question is for the people who are watching remotely. For the final project, it could be, maybe, a continuation of assignment 1, assignment 2, or assignment 3, or something new, if you really want to. So if you really want to do something completely different we haven't covered, it's up to you, right? The only thing I'd ask is you have to give credit to where you got your assets, right? And you have to use Unity, okay? You have to use C#. Please don't use JavaScript, right? These are going to be the things I'm going to ask you to do. And you have to follow my requirements. You have to have a scoring system. You have to have all these other things in place. Please don't combine the genres. That's the one thing I will not allow is, okay, my partner made a first, you know, kind of like, I'm putting it out there because I know people do this every time to me. Oh, I have a side-scrolling game, and my storyline is he's kind of flying this plane, and he lands in 2D, and he's on a platformer, and then he goes to the door, and all of a sudden he turns into 3D, and now I'm going to combine my first project, second project, and third project, and I got nothing to do. Tom, I'm done, right? No. The answer is no. Hell no is the answer, right? I'm not that dumb. You have to do actually some kind of work, right? So you can use one of the levels from one of your projects only, right? If you want to combine level 1 from yours and level 2 from somebody else's, and it's the same exact genre and it's very similar, like for example, you're doing a fantasy game, platformer in your second assignment, and so did somebody else, your partner, and it's very similar, you know, as an example, the mechanics, and then you want to combine to make a third level, that I might allow, right? Again, when we kind of go over what you're doing and what your plans are next week, you can tell me what your plans are and what you're doing. Please don't, you know, the next week is the week not to skip class, all right? We need to get together because as we move forward, right, our first week that we start our project is the week we kind of talk about concepts. What's your project about, right? And if it's really going in the wrong direction, can you imagine if you start working on it and then you work for 2 weeks and then it's completely wrong and you didn't show up to class? I can't tell you that it's wrong. That would be very bad for you, right? And very bad for me. It's hard to mark that. Like, how do I give you some part marks for something that's really not that great, or going in the totally different direction, or you took assets that you shouldn't have used, or you're making something that's not using Unity or something like that? That's crazy, right? So please attend class next week. I want to talk to everybody, and I want to talk to you all in groups. And it's only like a 2-minute conversation. Like, show me your stuff. Be ready to show me. I don't want you to sit there, oh, hold on, let me load it up for you, Tom. No, 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 no. Have your WebGL build done if you're going to show me next week. So you can double click and run it and ready to go, like that kind of stuff. So you can submit your stuff. For assignment part 1 and part 2, or sorry, assignment 3, part 1 and part 2, remember, both parts require a GitHub repo, right? And a WebGL build. My recommendation for you is, right, for part 1, do a GitHub repo. Part 2, use a second GitHub repo, not the first one. So you can keep it separate. So here's my first part, and here's my second part. Good, and then I can mark it separately, right? Same thing with your WebGL build. Here's my WebGL build for my first part. I put it aside now. Here's my WebGL build for my second part. Why am I doing that? Because here's what I've had in the past. You and your partner don't get along. You're not friendly. You go on a date, right? And the first time you go on a date, you don't like each other, right? The first time you work together. And then you don't want to work with that person anymore, okay? That's okay. You can work with somebody else on part 2. I will allow that. I will allow you to split from your team after next week, all right? If that didn't work for you. But you need to let me know who your team members are now, right? And I will not allow 3 people to work together, so please don't ask, right? This is not big enough for 3 people. It can be big enough for 2 people, not 3, right? So that's the thing. And same thing for your project. Your project can have multiple phases, multiple milestones. There'll be like phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4, right? Okay, I will allow you to switch groups from after phase 1, but not after phase 2, 3, 4. You know why? You go on a date and you go on a second date. Hey man, you went on a second date, right? If you didn't like the person in the first place, don't date them again, right? Doesn't make any sense. If you're having problems, is what I'm saying, you know, and I'm joking around, but if you're having problems with your group member, leave early. Like after the first week, I will allow it. After the second week, no, this is you. That's it now, right? So please pick your groups carefully. I'm not forcing you to pick with anybody else. And if you can't find a group member, ask about it on Slack. Put up a message saying, I need a group member. I need a partner, right? On Slack. That might come out in the general forum. It might come out, somebody can come out and help you, okay? On the downside, people have asked in the past, can you force somebody else to take me as their group? No, I'm not going to force anybody, right? Because it's like this. I force you 2 people to be together, let's say, and then all of a sudden things don't work out. Who's going to be blamed? Me. No. Yeah, I'm not going to be blamed for you guys not being able to work together when I put you guys together. So I want you guys to pick your group. All right? Any other questions around assignment 3, which is due? There's 2 parts. Part 1, it's like, think about smaller assignments. So 2 small 5% assignments. 1%, half of the assignments due next week, 5%. And then the other part, the other 5% is due the week after, okay? And then we're going to get right into our final project. The final project is going to have at least 3 parts and a presentation. That's 4 parts. They're all going to be broken up into smaller assignments, right? So you're going to be judged on each part. If you don't hand in part 1, but you hand in part 2, it's okay. You just won't get marks for part 1. You get marks for part 2, right? So that it won't kill everybody. Some people found it very challenging. The other thing I don't do is I don't let you, kind of give you a project and say, see you later. I'll see you in week 14, right? Because sometimes what happens is people don't start till week 13, right? And that would be catastrophic for your final project because it's going to be worth quite a bit. Think about this. I've only given these 5%, 5%, 5%. We're about 50% of our total course weight right now with assignment 3, right? And your exam. The other 50% is coming. It's going to be all in your final project, right? 50%, including your presentation, right? And all your 3 parts. That means your assignment, each of those parts, part 1, part 2, part 3, are probably going to be weighted between 10 and 15% each with you and your 2 partners. That's why, right? Because you have partners, people to help you build something, right? And then the final presentation is probably going to be worth 10%, and there's not going to be an exam. It's just going to be presentation week, the last week, okay? So I'm going to look at your presentation and give you a mark for your presentation right there, right? And that's what I'd like to do. So this is critical that you kind of assign, your kind of structure your work, plan your work accordingly, okay, please. Because it would be catastrophic if we couldn't do, your final project together properly with your partner. Any other questions around this? Because I want to move on. Assignment 3. Okay. Also, I put up a lab that's due on Monday. The lab is going to be something you have to build in Blender. I want you to build 2 models in Blender for Monday, right? Which I'm going to show you how to do today, right? They're due by the end of the day. They do not require a texture, all right? It's just modeling, right? And we're going to use those models today when we build our maze. I'm going to start building my maze game, which is for the 3D game that I'm going to show you as a tutorial, right? So we're going to do that in Blender. So please, if you haven't done it already, go to blender.org, right? And download the latest version of Blender if you don't have it. If you have it, even version 2.77, like the one I'm using, is perfectly fine, right? The machine in front of you may or may not have Blender. You may have to download it. It's about, I think, 85 megs right now, something like that. It's not that big. So you can download it fairly quickly. So I'll give you a bit of time to do that. And I'll kick off my Blender version. All right, things that you need for Blender. Remember what I talked about before. You need to understand the shortcuts are the best way to work with Blender, all right? But you don't have to use shortcuts. One thing I highly recommend, though, is some kind of, keyboard, right? Let me see if this works now. There we go. The keyboard, which is a numeric keypad that's separate, like this, if you're using a laptop. And for people who are watching, this is what I'm talking about, right? So people don't know what I'm saying. It's and I don't normally record myself, but what the hell? So what I'm looking at for this one is the numeric keypad, which is very, very important because it gives you the ability to switch between views very, very quickly, right? So if you're using a laptop at home, I recommend buying something like this. It's not that expensive. I think you can get it for as low as 20 bucks, and you can also spend hundreds of dollars on something like this. I don't know why you would, but you could. They're not that expensive. All right. So now that we have that out of the way, that the requirements for Blender, the other requirement that you need is a 3-button mouse, okay? Highly recommend a 3-button mouse. If you don't have a 3-button mouse, at least something like this. You could also buy something that's wireless. I know Ash was saying that she bought it for like 20 bucks. 12 bucks, even better. 12 bucks through Amazon. I think it's not that expensive to use. We're going to be using Blender throughout this next part, right? So, and why Blender? Why not use Maya? Why not use 3D Studio Max? Why not use these other tools? By the way, Maya and 3D Studio Max are installed on the school computers in front of you. It's part of our package. If you wanted to use Maya or 3D Studio Max, if you're more comfortable doing that, you certainly are able to do that. I can't. I'm not going to be able to do that because not everyone has access to that at home with their own machines. Although as a student, you have access to Autodesk Maya and the full Autodesk suite of products that we talked about before. Okay. So, Blender. Now, does everyone not have Blender loaded and ready? Please do not watch me on this one. If you're here in the class physically with me, this is a do class, not a watch class. All right? If you watch me today and all you do is watch and don't do, and I mean, again, you could always watch the videos later and do it there. You need to be able to follow along and do it. Okay, review, Blender. I'm going to ask you some questions, right? There are 3 properties of all polygonal objects, right, in Blender. What are the 3 properties that I'm talking about? And I'm talking about things when I look at them in 3-dimensional space, there are 3 properties that they all have. What are they? Faces. Yes, that's another kind of property. I'm talking about there's three things that I can do a property. Think about now if I go back to Unity, what are the 3 properties that are part of the transform of an object? Sorry? Position, rotation, and scale. Those are the 3 things. Position, rotation, and scale. And actually, those are the 3 things when we create a translation matrix, right? What we're doing is we're changing position of an object, the location of an object, that's what the location is, the rotation, and we're using Euler transformations or Euler transformations, depending on how you say that, in Blender, and scaling the object across different axes. So those are the 3 things we can do. Now, what you're talking about is what each object has when we create them, other properties of objects. The three other properties are vertices, which is where the edges meet, edges along the object, and faces. Each polygonal model has those things. We're using polygonal modeling or mesh modeling in Blender. We also have the option of using NURBS surface modeling, which is an older way of doing things. We don't use it that way anymore. Now, if you're doing things with Rhino, if you're someone who does things like 3D printing and that kind of stuff, they still use surface modeling for that, right? But in Blender, we're going to be using polygonal modeling, which is using meshes, okay? A review. So if I want to switch, a lot of times navigation is one thing we've got to review in Blender, right? Some of you did some Blender in COMP391. If you're a game student, you may have done that. Some of you did not. It's the same, depending on the professor you had, right? So if you did Blender in COMP391, this will be a review again for you. Again, I'm reviewing it because some people aren't good with Blender and these kinds of open source tools. One thing to note is, to select objects in Blender, you need to use the right mouse button to select. So it's a right click to select. Deselecting is with A. Use the A key to deselect. So if I click into Blender, and by the way, wherever your mouse is, if my mouse is hovering over here, down here, over here, or in here, that's where the focus is. And different keystrokes work differently depending on where your mouse is. Notice how when I hover my mouse over, there's a bit of a shift. It moves from the middle screen over here, this viewport, to the right. And same thing, there's a kind of a shift that goes from this side to this side to this side. So wherever your mouse is very important. Now, if I press the A button in the middle, it can deselect or select all. Now, I'm doing this in something called object mode, right? And object mode down here on the bottom, you can see that object mode has this little button, right? And if I select all, I also select my lamp and my camera in Blender. These things are also available to view in your outliner on the right side, right? So this is your outliner, which details your camera, your cube, and your lamp. Let's deselect all by moving my mouse to the middle of the screen and pressing A. And then let's hide my lamp and my camera for now, because we don't need them. So camera, and lamp, we're going to hide them. If I select all now, only my cube gets selected, not my camera or lamp. So selecting and deselecting, you can select and deselect all by toggling off the A button, right? A, deselect, select, right? The mouse itself, when I move in, if my mouse pointer is positioned in the viewport, this part, right? Not over here, not over here, and not over here. Here in the viewport. If I scroll with my scroll wheel in and out, I can zoom in and out, right? That's one thing you can do. Navigation. If I use my scroll wheel and click into the scroll wheel, right? So click down into the scroll wheel and move around the left and right, I will tumble around the object. Okay, the object will tumble around like this. Okay, same thing up and down. Okay, if I do the same thing and hold the shift key, however, so I click down onto my middle mouse button and hold the shift key, right? I can actually, what I want to do, I can actually move my object, depending on how I'm looking at it, up and down or left and right. I'm not tumbling now. The view is set, but what I'm doing is I'm moving. It's almost like I'm grabbing the entire world and moving it to the left or the right. Okay? This is the way we can focus quickly on an object. I can focus in, I can hold shift, move it around, I can zoom in, I can tumble, right, until I see the right view and move back out again. Right? So navigation is important to understand, right? It's slightly different, actually very different from Unity, right? We don't tumble around the same way in Unity as we do in Blender. Other things to note, differences in Blender, right click, other than just the right click, is the manipulator arms. The manipulator arms right here, it tells you that Blender has a Z up way of looking at things, right? So here's Z up and there's Y, there's the Y axis, and the red is the X axis. So again, green for the Y, blue for the Z, red for the X. And if you're confused, on the bottom left corner of the screen, you can see that there's X, Y, and Z, and it tells you what each of the arrows represent. When I'm in translation mode or I'm in grab mode, if you will. Notice on the bottom left, on the bottom of these, there's a couple of buttons here, right on the bottom of the screen. I'll bring these up for you so you can see them. If I kind of bring the screen up, you can see that there's some buttons here. There's this button here, which is the translate button, or transform, right? There's the middle button, which is an arc. That's for rotation. And there's this other button that looks like a little square. That's for scaling, right? So movement, rotation, and scaling. The shortcut keys for those who want to take note, are, again, if I want to click R, that's rotation, right? If I want to specify a axis, I press directly after the R, the axis, X, an example, and I can rotate around the X axis, right? If I want to scale, I can press the S key and then specify the axis. For example, the Y axis. I can scale along the Y axis, right? And if I press the G key for grab, right, I can move around the X axis only. So the G key does the translation across the X axis, right? So G for movement, S for scaling, R for rotation. Those are the shortcut keys. Or you could just choose these buttons down here, whatever you like. I prefer the shortcut keys a lot, but that's just me. All right? Again, moving around, I can tumble around the axis. One thing to note also is this. If I add another object into the scene, see this thing here, this funny little loop here, this little circle? This is the three-dimensional cursor. Wherever the 3D cursor is where my objects come into play, right? So they come into being wherever my 3D. So if I put it over here, and if I add an object, and the way to add an object is to go to Add, Mesh, Cube, or whatever object you want. Notice it appears wherever my 3D cursor is, right? How do I put my 3D cursor back to the center again, right? Well, the quick kit for this is Shift-S, and then you want to put cursor to center. If you hover over, actually, sometimes it'll also tell you the shortcut key, depending on what you're hovering over. So cursor to center. So Shift-S, again, if you didn't get that, Shift-S, and then cursor to center. That kind of snaps it to the center. And then when I create my new object, the shortcut key for creating or adding a mesh is, who knows? Shift-A. Shift-A adds a mesh. And let's say I want to add a UV sphere this time. It's in wherever the 3D cursor was. All right, so I got this messed up scene, and I don't like it. How do I fix it? I can undo, 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 or I can just go to File, New, and then Reload Startup File. And that'll reload everything the way it was. Again, let's do the same thing. Let's turn off, this is just a review. I'm going to turn off my camera so I don't see it, and turn off my lamp so I don't see that. And I'm going to zoom in. Okay, other things to note. So again, this is just a review of Blender because we did it the first week and then we haven't touched it since. And for people who have never done it in COMP391, this will be an opportunity for them to see it again. Again, things to note also is here on the left, there's the toolbar. And I want to sometimes translate this thing and move it around numerically as opposed to just by eye, like I've been doing it, right? So you can bring up the numeric transform bar, which is N. If you click the N button, N as in Norman, it brings up this numeric bar. And notice now it tells me about its location, the rotation, and the scale of this object, plus its dimensions. Right? What we want to do for our lab 2 is we want to convert this into metric. Right now it's Blender units, which is arbitrary units, right? To do that, you click on the Scene button, which is the third one on the top here in these tabs, right? The Scene button, and change it. And again, the latest version of Blender has a pull-down menu. But you can always go just to choose metric. That's the one I want. Metric means everything's in meters now, which is good. Okay, so I got this thing in meters. And the other thing is, I've got my numeric transform. I can toggle this on and off by pressing N to give myself more space. I can also toggle the toolbar on and off by pressing T. So T and N gives me a big space. T and N. Okay? So that's your navigation, navigating through the scene. Okay, right now we're in a mode for translating. We can, in object mode, We can change the location of an object, change the rotation of an object, change the scale of an object, change its dimensions by hand. You know, all these kinds of things we can do in object mode. But we cannot deform an object more than that. In order for us to do that in Maya, you can do it simply by right-clicking and changing which vertex you want. But here in Blender, what we need to do is change modes from object mode down here, and I'll bring it up again so you can see it, this button, to edit mode. Okay? The quick shortcut for this one is the tab key. So I can tab in and out of Blender, and notice when I tab into edit mode, my toolbar changes context. I can do different things in edit mode than I can in object mode. Okay? Same thing with my toolbar. My toolbar in edit mode is different than when it's in object mode. Okay. Next. So I want to toggle off my N. I want to talk about making by hand, I want to create a different layout, because layouts are very important to work with Blender too, right? Again, we're only talking about interface right now. Okay, we haven't done any modeling yet. So again, I can do modeling in edit mode, that's good. I can do some basic transforms and stuff in object mode. But let's talk about layouts. Right now I'm in my default layout. There's several different layouts. One is 3D view. So that's like rendered view. Okay? The other one is animation, if I'm going to do some animation. It has a timeline, a dope sheet, and so on. Next one is compositing view, right, where I can actually do a much more complex compositing view where I can actually do nodes. I can add nodes together to create a very complex shader system, right? Next, default view, which is what we were normally at. Notice that it kept everything that I did to it. It remembered, right? Then there's game logic. If you're going to build a game in Blender, which you can, right? Purely in Blender with something called logic bricks, or using Python if you really want to. So Blender. Motion tracking, okay, which we won't touch. Scripting, if you just purely want to do some scripting with Python, you can do that with the scripting mode. UV editing, which we'll be talking about today, to lay out textures on a material. We'll be using this mode, right? And the last one is video editing. If you're going to create a video with Blender, you can create a whole movie if you want, right? Okay, let's go back to default mode. What I want to do without changing anything here is I want to click the plus sign right next to the default. And it's going to create a new layout, which we're going to call, you know, for view. We don't have a for view layout. We're going to make it for view. And the way to change your layout is, notice on the top there's these three diagonal bars. I want you to grab this top bar here and just pull it over to the side. Now you have a two view. This is two views here. I just pull the top bar here to do that. That's it. And I can do the same thing for a three view, right? Or a four view. There we go. Now I can also pull down this part and crush my my animation view. Okay, here's the other thing I want to do here. Now this is my four view, right? But it doesn't make sense that I have four of the same views. Because when I rotate one, I don't rotate the other ones. This is just different previews from different sides. Most of the times what I want to do is make this orthographic, these three views orthographic, right? And what I want to do here is this should be the top view, this should be the front view, and this should be the right view. Yes? You missed it? Okay. All I did was I grabbed these diagonal bars and moved it to the side. So drag this stuff to the side. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to use my numeric keypad. Remember, my mouse hovering is very important now because I've got four different views, right? So my mouse hovering over here, I want to take my numeric keypad, I want to make this the top. What's the top? How do I get to the top view with my numeric keypad? Who knows? 7. The other way to do it, of course, is the view. If you go to view, if you don't have your numeric keypad, go to view, top. That'll do it too, right? Now I want to make this, I want to toggle it off. Right now it's perspective, it says perspective, but I want to make it flat. And the way to do that is click the 5 button on your numeric keypad, or go to view, view, and then perspective orthographic. It's a toggle, right? So if I keep toggling that on, you can see that it goes from perspective to orthographic mode. I want to do the same thing. This one should be my front view, right? What's my front view? 1, right? And I want to make this orthographic. And this should be my right view, which is 3. right view and orthographic. Why? Why would I want to work like this? Because when it comes to modeling, it's way easier for me to work from one aspect, one view, right, than it is for me to work in this view, which is perspective view. Now I want to be able to quickly toggle from this kind of thing, right, to default. And I can do that by just going back to default. Default, right, or I can go back to 4 view and so on. I don't even need all these bars. Notice that I've got a toolbar here, a toolbar here, a toolbar here. There's too many toolbars. I can get rid of them, right? So I can say no toolbar here, here, or even here, right? Because sometimes I don't need all those toolbars, and I can put them back when I want them. Notice that there's these little plus keys, right? So if I click this little plus bar, it'll bring the toolbar back, right? Or I can just toggle it with the T, right? So lots of control. Now, if I move something in one view, it moves everything else. Example, if I was to transform from front view, if I move it to the right, notice how it moves everything to the right, or to the left, it moves everything to the left. And it happens in 2 different views, right? So that's front view, right or left. And there's top view. You can see how it's moving across the x-axis. And same thing goes with if I go up and down. Here's right view, right? If I want to move this front and back, you know, these other 3 views move, right? Or up and down, right? Left and right. Or this way, right? You can do all that stuff. Again, if you ever want to put this back to the middle, because we've just transformed, I can go to one of them like this, put up a numeric view with n, and then change my location back to 0. Okay, numerically. All right, this is the long way to do the 4 view. I've created my own layout. Let's go back to default view for a second. There is a quicker way to do it, okay? The quicker way to do a 4 view is actually, if you go to is it file? No, it is view. If you go to view and you scroll all the way to the top, notice that there is a quad view. They call it quad view, and the quick hit for that is Control-Alt-Q, or for the Mac, Command-Q, or Command-Option-Q. That's what it would be. So I think Command-Option-Q. No, that's not the one for the Mac. Or is it Control? Maybe it's Control-Option-Q. Control-Option-Q. There it is. Same thing, right? So you can toggle that on and off. This is in default view. So Control-Option-Q, and you can toggle that really quickly, right? So I'm showing you this because this is a great way to work, right, in 4 view, and this is even in default mode, right? Because I want to quickly toggle from one view to the other, right? So if I go back, let's say for example, I want to work in front view, right? So I want to do this main view in front view in orthographic, right? Here it is. And then I want to toggle the 4 view, right? See how it looks in 4 view. I can do that. Control-Alt-Q, bam, I'm in 4 view. And you can see what my front ortho looks like, plus my other ones. Notice that this stayed the same. Whatever I was in is what it is in, it's in now. So again, Control-Alt-Q brings me back to that front view. Okay. So we've done lots of kind of navigation stuff in Blender, but we haven't done anything. I'm doing this because, again, just as a review, because some people don't know Blender well enough, or they've seen it, they forgot it, they haven't touched it for a long time. That's okay. But now what I want to do is I want to go into edit mode, okay? And I want to do this in perspective. So I'm going to go back to the perspective view, and I want to scroll out, and I want to go into edit mode. So I'm press tab to get into edit mode. Launch Blender. You got to do this with me. Launch Blender, please. Don't just watch me today. Okay, so here we are. So here we are in perspective mode, right? Now, I can't really do anything here, right? Because everything is selected. And if I deselect all by pressing A, the A button, by default, it's in vertex select mode. Vertex select mode, right? And if I right-click on a vertex, right, you can see that I can start deforming my object, right, like we did before. So there's vertex select mode, and on the bottom, right, you can see that there is edge select mode. Here's edge select mode, where I can select an edge, and I can deform that, right? And there's also face select mode. Left click to select the button, and then right click to select the face, where I can deform that, right? So I can deform my cube by doing a number of deformations, but it's still pretty boring, right? Because I can only do kind of one side at a time. Let's undo that. So undo, 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 until my cube is perfect again. If this doesn't work, you can always go to File, New, and I'll do that with you now because I don't need my 4 view, right? And click on Reload Startup File. One thing to note is when you do that, your 4 view is gone. It doesn't save that, right? That's your own custom view. Now you can change Blender. There's lots of changes you can make to make your own plugins and templates for Blender if you like. We're not going to go there. All right, so I got my cube. Again, I'm going to get rid of my camera and my in the scene and my lamp by hiding them. Scroll in, tab into edit mode, right? Again, does Control Alt Q? Does it work with edit mode? Sure, it does, right? So even in edit mode, that key combination works. Okay, good. Now here's what I want to do. I want to subdivide my object, right? In order for me to be able to gain control over it, right? Because even a primitive like a cube, and again, the primitives, when I talk primitives, the primitive shapes, cube, sphere, torus, cone, all those kinds of things, planes, they're all primitive shapes. And we can subdivide them to get control. We've done this before, but just as a review. I can scroll down on the toolbar, which has changed because now I'm in edit mode, and I want to find somewhere where it says subdivide, which is right here. So if I click subdivide, now if you notice I've got one division. Let me undo that for a second because I think one thing I remember to tell you is this. We want to keep our objects as simple as we can when we model them. Because the more complex they are, the more computationally expensive they become. All right? Right now, as a good example of that, we have 8 vertices, 12 edges, you can see the numbers up here, and 6 faces, 12 triangles, right? When we talk about a low poly object, you may have a budget for the number of polygons to create. And it may not be now, but if you're working in a real game studio or someplace, they might give you a budget. They might say, you know, keep it under 100 polygons, right? That's really low poly, by the way, right? Right now we're at 12, right? We only have a cube. How do I make that more complex? Well, again, if I subdivide it, so if I go to the subdivide button, subdivide it, all of a sudden I have double the amount of stuff. 26 vertices, 48 edges, in fact it quadrupled in some ways, 24 faces, and 48 triangles. That's huge, right? We're almost at half of our budget if we had only had 100, right? That's crazy. And if we subdivide it again by clicking this on the left, number of cuts, if I go number of cuts is 2, you can see that I've got 56 vertices and 108 triangles. We're good. That's it. This is our low poly model, right? With a budget of 100. Actually, we're just a bit over 108, right? But again, if you looked at this thing, this low poly model that we have right now, we have several more control points, right? Let's add another one. So we have a number of cuts, 3 cuts. And now we have almost double the amount of polygons, 192. So every time we cut in all 4 directions, or all 3 directions, I mean, right? So from each axis, we cut. All right, if I deselect all by pressing the A key, and I'm now, by default, I'm in vertex select mode, and if I start deforming my object, I can certainly do that now much more granularly. By deforming my object, you know, one at a time, you can make your object look whatever you like, however you like, right? And I can do this. Another great way of doing this is, again, through one particular view. So let's undo those changes. So undo, 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 undo. There we go, they're undo. And then I want to go to my front view. Let's click into front view. So press the 1 on the numeric keypad. And then go into 5 for orthographic mode, right? And you can see that still I have 1 vertex selected. I'm going to deselect all by pressing the A button. And now I have nothing selected. One other thing to do when we have a polygon in 3D is we want to be able to see things in wireframe mode. So wireframe mode, how do I get there? The Z key. I can toggle in and out of wireframe mode. How this looks in perspective is like this, where you can actually see the entire frame or matrix of the entire device, whatever you're making. If I go back and orthographic, you can see that this is the case. Why? Why am I moving in this particular case? I want to be able to select multiple vertices and multiple edges, but I want to do it here because I can look through, or I'm almost like an X-ray mode, where I can look through everything and select everything at once. Like for example, I want all the edges on the top part of this object right here. I'm going to use box select mode, which you can access through the B key. B as in Bob. Right? So B, box select mode, notice there's two crosshairs. And then I can select the area that I want. Now I've selected all of the vertices, right? Not just one, all of them, right? So again, from front view, if I deform one, I deform all. And I don't have to do a numeric deform this way. I can do it numerically, right? So I can say, well, you know, on the X, I'm deforming everything by exactly 1.5, right? As an example, there's 1.5. Let's move the Y to 0. We don't want to move that, so on my transform. And you can see that they're all exactly a 1.5, right? Because I've numerically transformed everything. I've just taken away that with the N key. Right? So N key to deselect. Now if I want to go back to the front view, I'm in orthographic mode. You can see that modeling becomes a lot easier just from one perspective, right? Same thing here. If I want to kind of grab these ones, so actually I'm going to change my shape now, right? So I'm going to kind of deselect all, escape, deselect all, B for B select mode, and then select these vertices. And then I'm going to kind of move these up, right? This is top view here, so they're a little bit higher. And if I want to know exactly what I've done, I can always go back over here to numeric select mode, make sure this is 0, and then put this to a 1.6, something like that. Now, what does my shape look like? It looks like this. Could be some kind of house, maybe you made, or some kind of, the beginnings of some kind of object, right? Okay. And how about these ones? These ones here, right? So that's what it looks like. I pressed Z to get solid mode again, and I pressed 5 for perspective to get back to here. Notice that I've got the beginnings of something, right? And what I want to do is I want to continue to deform things. I can also scale these things too, right? I don't have to accept this the way it is. And if I press the S key right now, and the S key has a little rope, right? I can expand the rope so it's really long, like so pull it to the right, or go towards the middle and scale these things in a little bit, right? And even invert them like this. That would be very bad. Don't invert stuff, because from a model perspective, the computer doesn't know what to do with this stuff, right? From shading and all that. But you could do as far as this. Notice how it just kind of snaps in, right? So I can kind of put this into place like this, right? Now, to understand what I've just done, in front view, in orthographic mode, you can hardly see the change. I mean, this is a bit of change in lighting, but that's it. But when I go to side view, you can certainly see it, how it's tapered in now, because I've scaled everything in. From the top view, again, you see how it's tapered in on this one side, right? But tapering and all that stuff is cool. I can definitely subdivide certain things, by using the subdivide key, right? But what about if I want to add additional details into an object without subdividing? How do I do that? I can do something called loop cuts. So I'm going to do Control Tab. I'm going to move into edge mode. This is why we do edge mode. And I can use the technique called loop cut and slide to add additional details in different aspects. Let me show you. So if I press the loop cut and slide key on the left, that's one option. Or notice that it also gives you the shortcut key of Control R, right? So loop cut and slide. The way it works is this. Let me show it to you from a front view first. There's front view. So I want to add additional geometry up here, right, onto this face here, right? So again, I'm going to just select loop cut and slide. And notice, depending on if I kind of go to the top, I get a loop that goes from top to bottom. If I go to the left, I get a loop that goes from left to right here. Same thing here. Notice how it curves. Because I've curved the surface over here, the loop cut curves. And this is what I want you to do. Put it here. And now you can slide it around like this. As it slides, it's proportionally sliding and cutting around the surface. Right? We'll leave it in the middle for now. Now if I rotate around to the front, or to the right, I mean, now you can see that there's some more geometry this way. Okay? How about if I want to add geometry over here, right? I want to do the same loop, cut, and slide, right? Can I do it this way from here? And it would work if you look at it. So again, I'm going from the front view. I'm going to click, this time I'm going to use Control R. I'm going to come and go to the top here, and I'm going to just select, I'm going to click it, left click it once and then twice, just to solidify where it's going to go. So now I've got another loop here and a loop there. Notice now the number of triangles, 256 triangles. Okay? But I'm using loop, cut, and slide here in order for me to add additional control points or additional geometry so I can deform my object a little bit more specifically. An example is if I want to make this object into a character. Now right now it looks like something, it looks like a building with a bit of an edge to it or something else. But I want to make this into kind of like a dog shape, right? Like a dog head here, and maybe some ears on this side. So let's add some ears. So I'm going to go Control Tab into face mode, and I'll grab this, and I'll Shift select this, and now I want to bring these ears up. If I just do this, it's just going to make it look like this, which is kind of weird. That's not what I want. I want to do something else, another operation. I want to extrude. I want to add geometry. So in order for you to extrude, again, there's a button on the left. You can click Extrude button. And when you click the Extrude button, right, you can region select or extrude the ears up if you like, undo. Or you can press the E key, E, and extrude up. Hey, now that I've got this, if I want them to look like ears, I want to rotate. And I can do that by clicking the Rotate button. I can rotate this way, all the way around, or limit it on an axis. For example, the y-axis is probably where I want to limit it. And I can rotate the ears, so that they, or eyes, maybe they're eye stalks. How about that? They're kind of better as eye stalks than ear stalks, right? There we go. And you can limit almost like a frog-like face. There we go. How about that? Instead of ears, they're eyes. Right, there we go. And let's continue with this. So I want to kind of extrude from here again. So I'm going to press the E key, extrude up, right? And then rotate again. So rotate across the y-axis. So R and then W, R and then Y, right? So I can kind of have like these little eye stalks that kind of look at the character. There we go. All right, so that's one part. What about the back, right? I want to select this whole back and round it out a little bit because it's too square, right? So how would I do that? So again, press 1 to go into ortho mode, and I want to go the Z key so I can go into wireframe mode. I want to press Control Tab to go into vertex select mode, and then I want to deselect all by pressing the A button, and then press B select mode to select the back. There we go. And what I want to do is this time I want to press the G key. This is neat. I press the G key. I can, you know, kind of by eye, select where I want the back to be kind of a little bit more rounded. Now if I look at it, what it looks like is all of it's rounded, right? So kind of got the top and the back going on. And maybe I want to give this little guy a bit of a bump on the back here, right? So I want to bring the leg, these legs parts in. That's what I want to do. So again, I want to do the same thing. I want to kind of make it so it's more rounded in the back. And depending on how I want to do this, I want to maybe make it more rounded on this side. For now, I'm going to deselect all. Let's try the front first. B for B select all, B select mode. Select these ones. And what I want is I want to pull these in a little bit. See how I'm messing with the geometry, right? So I'm deforming everything. That's what I'm doing, right? Creating my little character or whatever, my shape. Now I got some extra stuff that I don't need. If I go back to Z mode, right? I got lots of geometry on the front, but I want to make this the leg, and I don't want to have this stuff. How do I get rid of stuff, right? So I want to make this part, and this part, the front legs, and then maybe this part here, the back leg. But this part in here isn't necessary. How do I get rid of this part? So I want to get rid of, deselect all, this part in here, right? So again, I would go into deselect all, then B select mode, select the parts I want to get rid of, like just in here. So these vertices, and then press X or the delete key. And then select delete vertices. And now you got this. Delete vertices. Remember, don't deselect stuff you don't want, right? Okay, but now I got a problem. I got all these holes, right? And I also got some stuff on the other side. I mean, I want 4 legs, maybe. I don't want 5 legs. He's not that kind of creature, right? You know, and I want him to I want to fix him from the front too, right? So let's go to the press the right side. I'm on the right side now. And I want to get rid of these vertices now too, these ones, right? So again, I'm going to deselect all, right? Press the B key just to select those vertices in the middle, right? And then press X to delete. And I'm going to delete vertices. Okay, now I got this, right? But I'm missing some geometry, right? Let's take a look at the geometry I'm missing. I'm missing all this other stuff inside. How do I put this back, right? I want to kind of look at the bottom, and I can see this big hole in the bottom, right? Well, it's actually kind of cool what we can do, right? I can form out the geometry I need, right? By starting to, you know, think about boxing it in, all right? So what I want to do is I want to create simple shapes, right? And the first thing is I know that this part here is going to be flat. So I'm going to go to vertex select mode again. Make sure you're in vertex select mode. And click this one, this vertex right here. I'm doing this in solid view so I can see what I'm doing. And then this one. Shift select that one. Make sure that it's the top vertex on the outside, not the inner one. So this one, and so this one in the front over here, and this one on the back over here. That's first vertex. Second one, I want to shift select this one, and then move around to the other side, and shift select this one. Okay, there. Now I've got 4 vertices selected. 4 vertices selected, 3 or 4. If I can do 3 or 4 vertices selected, I can create a face. And I can do that with what key? F for face. Right? Let's do the same thing with the other ones. So I'm going to right click here, right click here, right click here, right click here, and create a face. Right? Hey, now that I have these, right, I have some control points. Now it becomes more and more complex to do this part of the box here, right? So we can certainly go on and do the rest, but I want you to think about what the problems would be with doing the rest. The problems would be I don't have any control points down here, right? I don't have any control points down here. However, what I can do, can I loop, cut, and slide this down here? Can I? And the answer might be no. Let me show you this. So again, I'm going to Control Tab into Edge mode. And what I want to do is I want to loop, cut, and slide down here. So I'm going to Control R. And yes, I can't because there are 2 faces. So I'm going to loop, cut, and slide. But the challenge that I have is I need to, I'm going to undo that thing. I need to be able to see this from one perspective so I can see where I'm going to loop, cut, and slide. I need the bottom of this thing. I know how to get to the top. How do I swivel so I can see this thing from orthographic mode from the bottom? And the answer is Control and 7. Control and 7 will do it. So if you press Control and the 7 key on the number pad, you get the bottom. Okay? I still want it ortho mode. All right, but this is what I see. So now you can see that this is the bottom. Why did I do this? Because it's flat, and I see that this is 1 foot right here, and this is the other foot right here. So I want a line that goes from here to here, right? So I can connect them. So now I can do loop, cut, and slide. So Control Tab Edge, deselect all. Now Control R, loop cut and slide. And I can move this edge as closely as I can to the front, to this part, and do another loop cut and slide to get control points so that it's as close to the line as I can. Loop cut and slide to give me the geometry I need this way. And the same thing over here. Loop cut and slide. And that's by eye. Now that I can do that, you can see that I've cut the geometry, and now I have more vertices over here that I can combine with. Whew, let's do that part. So, and this is going to be like a little bit complex, like I said, but this is the way. There's other ways we could have done this. If we were smart enough, we probably could have cut it differently than this way. And instead of cutting like this, we could have extruded by removing the bottom part and extrude it out as opposed to cut it up like this. I just wanted to show you how to do this too. All right, so we got these control points here and Control Tab to vertex select mode. Let's do some. So this one, this one, this one, and this one, face. This one, this one, this one, and this one, face. And the same thing goes with, now I gotta select this one because this one's kind of in the middle. Face. There we go. So I've got that big fat leg. Let's do the other side. Now we're going to have trouble doing the back. Well, we'll talk about that. So that. Face. 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 There we go. And we'll do the back now. This one too. And we'll do the other one. Let's see if you guys can do this. Face. All right, we're almost there. We almost have all the control points we need. So we're going to go this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. And the same thing goes with this one. Almost there. You can see how we can construct from a primitive a very simple character. By no means complexity is involved here. There's no complexity other than creating our shape. Notice I'm getting all the vertices here. And now the bottom part, the final part, which is this part. And one more to kind of cover up the holes. You could have done that too. We're going to do that in a second. Mirroring is awesome because if we want to make organic changes. All right, there we go. So we got the whole bottom done. Let me flip to the top again, or the side. And now we have a shape. Yay. We'll look at it from the front. We'll look at it from the right. It looks like some kind of creature, right? That's what mine looks like. I don't know what yours ended up looking like. It's cool. But we're seeing that there's a lot of problems, and we're duplicating our efforts, right? We're duplicating effort over and over again. And I think there's an easier way to do this, all right? And the easier way to do this would be to mirror from one side to the other. Now, the way to mirror would be to see the shape you want to mirror. For example, if I want to start mirroring from this side, right? Here I am. I need to cut away half the shape. Now this is a little bit, you might be like, no, don't cut my shape in half. And the answer is, it's okay, don't worry, right? How do I do this? Again, I'm going to go into Z mode, which is wireframe mode. Deselect all. I'm going to use my B select mode. My B select mode, select B, but not including the middle set of vertices, everything to the left, right? I'm going to just select all these vertices to the left of this beast, right? And then press X to delete. And it'll delete vertices. and now you're left with this, half of an object. Okay, this half. Okay, this is cool. We got half an object. Now what do we do? Well, if you scroll on the right here, where there's these tabs on the right side of the screen, outside of the viewport, if you scroll with your scroll bar until you get the this little wrench, you can add a modifier. And what we want to add in is, in the middle, to the left, is a mirror modifier. Now the problem with this is that it's mirroring wrong. You don't want to mirror across the x-axis. You want to mirror along the y-axis, right? And you can see now, as we mirror along the y-axis, because we're looking at it from the right side, right? We can see what it's doing. Okay, if I go out of wireframe mode into solid mode, you can see that it's mirrored. So why would I want to do this? Because now anything I do to the right happens to the left. An example of this would be if I press Control Tab and go to vertex select mode and hit this one, this vertex, right? And if I want to kind of drag this in, so does the other side automatically. So it becomes more organic when it comes to, like, or symmetrical, I think is the right word to use. Maybe organic's the wrong word. And especially if I want to do this, I want to kind of move this one out a little bit, make this kind of a differently shaped face, right? I can do that. I can start being more detailed in some of the work I'm doing, right? For example, if I want part of the eye stalks or whatever to have more detail, I can add detail to the eye stalks by pressing Control R, right? Adding a loop cut to the eye stalk. And another loop cut to the eye stalk, and another loop cut to the eye stalk, until I have what I'm looking for, right? Which is this part right here. And then I can extrude this one too, like this, right? So I can make the eyes kind of pop out. And if I don't like the eyes popping out, I can pop them in too. So I can kind of bring them in, right? And there we go. Kind of a little beastie. One thing to note is, because you're mirroring, if you do this, if you click the middle vertex, so if I click the middle vertex and I open it up, I break the mirror, right? So don't do this. Hello, hi, my name is, right? You don't want that. In fact, you don't want to touch the middle ones at all. Now there's quite a bit of complexity. Notice there's 308 triangles, right, compared to what we had before, because I've added quite a bit of complexity here. If I want to smooth this out even further, I can bring these shapes, these rounded shapes, in a little bit more. One thing to do, and I didn't show this to the other class, is you can do a bevel. I want to bevel across one side, right? So again, I got to be in edge mode, and I want to bevel, right? Now notice that there is no option here for beveling, right? What I want to do is I want to select a whole edge, right? And the way to do the whole edge, including this part, is you can certainly shift click to select the edge you want to bevel. So this is the edge I want to bevel. I want to make this rounded. Okay. Under mesh, right? And notice if I go to edges, right? I can do all kinds of stuff. I can continue to subdivide the edges if I like, right? I can delete loose stuff. I can change the normals, recalculate normals. I can also sort out other things. This is all in the menu. Show high proportional editing. You can turn proportional editing on and off. This is on the mesh side, right? So I could do that. So that's edge faces. On faces, I could bevel. So what I want to do is, in order for me to get the bevel command, under faces, I can click, if you look at bevel, Control B. Now, what it can do is, it can add geometry to the face. Now watch what it's doing here. It's kind of adding geometry. Now, at the beginning, all you need to do is click it once. So how much geometry do you want to bevel? So Control B. And then, how many segments do you want? Like this. So now you can see that I've added in a bit of geometry to the edge. A bit of a cut. And you can keep doing that. If I want more cuts, I can add more cuts, so more of a rounded shape to it. Look. A rounded shape to the eye. And a rounded shape to this whole edge. And because I'm mirroring, it happens on the left side too. And I want to do the same thing for this part. I want to bevel this part. So this one and this one. So I want to kind of mirror this one, kind of bevel that one. So again, it's Control B. And now it remembers the number of cuts. And the same thing for the bottom edges. So I can kind of create this edge. And Control B. Oops, undo. Control B. Oh. Same thing for this one. Control B. Yeah, so it kind of make a more rounded geometry here for the face, right? And the same thing goes in any edges you want. Like I want to make more of a rounded mouth. These things here, I want them beveled. So I could Control B. And then, you can kind of round out those edges as well. And any other edges you want. Like especially on the legs, you can make them more rounded by, shift selecting all those edges. Making sure you get the right ones. So I didn't capture the right ones. So shift select, oops, not this one, this one. And let me just work in perspective mode here for a second. And if you want to do them all at once, you can try that too, right? Like I want to do those ones and I want to do these ones. And Control B. And that didn't work, so undo. Let's just do these ones. Oh. All I'm doing is I'm rounding out the edges. And again, as you can see, as I keep doing that, more geometry happens. And now we're at 468 or 476 triangles, right? So something that started really simple, you can get as complex as you like. And I think it's a great place to take a break. When we come back, we're going to start building our tiles and getting everything going with the stuff in Unity. How do I bring this thing into Unity? Right? So let's take a break and we'll come back and we'll do that.